Welcome to the 9th annual Daines Convocation. It seems impossible that we're entering our 9th year as a college. This is made possible and sponsored by the Tanner Charitable Trust, the Marie Eccles Caine Foundation, Russell Family, and differential tuition provided by the students of the Caine College of the Arts. Before we begin our convocation, I'd like to make a few introductions. First of all, I want to acknowledge the presence of members of the Caine College of the Arts Advancement Council. Would the members of the council please stand, and if you'd bring up the lights in the house and leave them up for just a few minutes. Please join me in thanking our Advancement Council. From the university, I want to acknowledge Janet Anderson, Vice President and Vice Provost of the college. Janet, if you're here, please stand. And my other deans of the colleges, Ken White from the College of Agriculture, Mara Hagen from the College of Science, and Richard Inoue from the Graduate School. We welcome them and thank them for being here. And all of the friends of the college and our many, many donors. And a special recognition to a gentleman who really put all of this in motion, the Caine College of the Arts. President Stan Albrecht is with us today, and his wife Joyce Albrecht serves on our Advancement Council. President Albrecht, thank you for your vision and energy and trust and faith in establishing the Caine College of the Arts. Stan and Joyce, are you here? There's Joyce. Joyce was the first advancement officer for the college, and a debt of gratitude we owe to her for all that she has done. And now I welcome Associate Dean Chris Terry to the microphone, who has some introductions to make.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of introducing a series of student groups, and I'd like to begin with the recognition of the USUSA Art Senator, Sierra Wise. Sierra, would you please stand? Sierra is now just beginning her second term with us and doing a fabulous job. She also has her Arts Council with her, and I'll read their names. As I read your name, would you please stand? And I'll ask the audience to hold your applause until we get everybody standing. Sterling Brenna, Becky Brock, Emery Hare, Keaton Howell, Camber Jensen, Ashley Jimenez, Katie Miner, excuse me, just one moment, I have to turn the page, Marissa Purnell, Drew Rogers, Dorothy Smith, Tess Swindle, Kenya Thompson, Melissa Tinsley, Larissa Washburn. Please give a hand to our Student Arts Council. Thank you very much. I also have the privilege of recognizing the Caine College of the Arts student ambassadors, and I'll read your names. And ambassadors, would you please stand and when I call your name? Madison Archibald, Becky Brock, Austin Clark, Hannah Jackson, Nikki Jameson, Peter Johnson, Nathan Scott, Mitch Shira, Becca Swan, and Tasha Urban. These are the Caine College ambassadors. Please give a round of applause for them. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to recognize the Caine Scholars. And first, from the Department of Art and Design, as I call your name, please stand. Brooke Anderson, Ekaterina Fulmer, Marissa Garner, Kylie Horsley, Bailey Jones, Jamie Lancaster, Marissa Lords, Morgan McKinley, Skylar Musgrave, Hannah Stevenson, Emily Lindsay Tusher, Melissa Tinsley, Tasha Urban, and that's it for the Department of Art and Design, but I'll go on now and read the members of the Caine Scholars from the Department of Music. Caitlin Bauer, Reagan Call, Danielle Casos, Abdullah El Hadi, Katerina Knight, Kimberly Lewin, Bella Mayer, McKenna Smith, Olivia Thompson, Megan Warburton, Emily Winder, and Abby Wheeler. And Caine Scholars from the Department of Theater Arts include Elizabeth Bohannon, Maya Bowers, Noah Dixon, Aubrey Felty, Scotty Fletcher, Mitch Shira, Jordan Simons, Alex Smith, Madison Nielsen, and Sydney Vance. These are all members of the Caine Scholar Program. Please give them a round of applause.
I would like to now introduce the person who's going to introduce our guest. This is the culmination of 11 years of dreaming and hoping that we could bring this artist to Utah State University. I first was introduced to the work of Patrick Dougherty in 2008, the year I came to Utah State University. I had a chance to see an installation of his at St. John's College in Minnesota, and I was transfixed by its power, its rhythm, its music, its joy, and I wanted it to be at Utah State University. I didn't know how it was going to happen at that time, but as we made plans for the celebration of the Year of the Arts and celebrate the transformation of the Chase Fine Arts Center, it seemed to be the perfect grand finale to this celebration to bring him here. I also knew there was one person on our staff that could bring this about, and that's Professor Laura Gelfand, who at that time was department head for art and design. I said, Laura, get him here, and let's make this happen. And she tenaciously, over the last 3 years, has worked so hard to make this possible. I have to pay tribute to Laura. This would not have happened without her hard work, her vision, and her can-do attitude. I am so grateful to her. Next week, Laura begins a sabbatical and a Fulbright scholarship to York University in Yorkshire, England, where she will pursue studies on her passion, wolves in the medieval time, and the visual image of wolves. She has a passion for all things dealing with nature, and this seemed, the Patrick Dougherty project was perfect for her. So to introduce our guest, would you please welcome Professor Laura Gelfand.
Thank you, Craig. Good evening to all of you. Patrick Dougherty's residency and his wonderful sculpture are the direct result of Dean Jessup's vision for the USU campus. As he said, Craig first spoke with me about bringing Patrick here 8 years ago, and his commitment to making this happen has never wavered. So it is particularly appropriate that Patrick's residency caps off the highly successful Year of the Arts, a college-led celebration of the ways in which the arts elevate all of us. So please join me in thanking Craig Jessup for his leadership and for elevating the status of the arts at USU. I'm fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with Pat for the last 2.5 weeks as he and his son Sam and over 100 volunteers have come together to build a sculpture that is already becoming a campus landmark. And it occurs to me, maybe those who have worked on the sculpture, could you stand up? All those who volunteered, who've done a stint? Because I think there are quite a few of you. Thanks to all of you. Rather than providing a standard recitation of Pat's many achievements, it seems more appropriate to introduce him by noting how hard he works. Sam and Pat have worked on the sculpture every day from 8 to 5 for more than 2 weeks, including on Saturday and Sunday. They have worked through cold mornings and scorching afternoons. They work harder and longer than everyone else, and Pat does this for 10 months every year. The work is physical, but it is also the demanding mental work of making instantaneous aesthetic decisions. Their work continued while an enormous hurricane was bearing down on their home state of North Carolina. Their work continued even after a copperhead snake bit Pat's dog on the tongue. I would have been like, out. And actually, his dog's fine. Don't worry. And all this hard work produced more than a sculpture. It fostered community. Hundreds of people have read about the sculpture. They have hovered nearby watching the construction process. They have even looked up from their phones and spoken to strangers about it. Driven by curiosity, another important byproduct of the process, many have stopped by to meet the artist, and Pat has patiently answered their questions. He has graciously welcomed everyone, encouraged their interest, and politely disengaged to get back to his work. Pat's sculptures attest to the power and the beauty of hard work. And with that, I ask that you join me in welcoming Patrick Dougherty to USU.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm impressed. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk a little while and then show you some images secondly. You know, my son Sam, he graduated from college and then he decided to help me about 2 years ago. But when he was a kid, he had a children's book about 3 bears that encountered urban sprawl. And the story goes that these little bears come up over a hill one morning near their den. And they come up over a hill and look down, and somebody's built a shopping center overnight. Well, already people are hustling and bustling up and down the sidewalk, and they all look so satisfied. Well, the little bears, they're not sure they're happy anymore. And somewhere they find people clothes, and the next sequence of pictures, you see these little pint-sized figures moving amongst the legs of all the other passers-by. And the caption reads, well, now that they're like everybody else, are they really happy? Well, no, not really, because underneath those people clothes still beat their furry little animal hearts. Well, a big wind comes up and it blows, men's ties up, women's skirts out, and one big gust blows all the little bears' clothes off. And for the first time, they realize who and what they are. Man, they go tearing back across a parking lot, up over a hill to a place they could just be themselves. Well, it wasn't so many years ago as a crow flies that I was getting ready for work. I had a coat and tie on and a briefcase. I start down my walkway, a really big wind comes up, and it blows and it blows. The first gust blows my briefcase right down the street. The second blows off my coat and tie. The third blows everything else away. As I'm standing there, completely amazed at this unlikely turbulence in my life, the only thing I can feel under those people clothes is this thudding of an animal heart. And I have flashbacks to all the times in my life that all I could think about was giving up my regular life, going off into the distance, maybe into the wilderness, and building a small cabin and living in a more essential way. Well, it was a time of change for me, so I found myself at the how-to section of the library. I see things like load bearing and R factor and coefficient, and I say, well, you know, maybe building a house, even a small cabin, is a lot harder than I thought. Luckily for me, I start back across the library. I happen to stumble on a stack of National Geographics. And maybe the first article I picked up was about the barrios in Rio de Janeiro, in which a whole portion of the population, the disenfranchised, have to go out into the highways and byways, pick up the cast-offs, the dendritis of urban life, and take that material somewhere and build them a place to live. So I know I'm not supposed to like this because these are really poor people, and yet they've done an amazing job with the materials that they had at hand. In my mind, it constituted a kind of raw aesthetic. Or maybe it was an article about a tribe in the Amazon basin who had to go into the jungle and forage whatever was there to build the things they needed. I said, well, I know these huts don't have any electricity or running water, but they're beautiful, and they fit so well back into the environment from which the material was taken. Or maybe it was a bird from Africa that had done an amazing engineering feat. I said, well, I know these birds are not smart enough to do this, but in human terms, it's amazing craftsmanship. As then I realized that maybe I wasn't a normal builder. Maybe I was more of a hunter and gatherer or some kind of an inspiration builder. And I did get started on that house, and I learned some things while building it that have really stood me in good stead in my art life. Maybe the first is learning to accept your progress. Because if you don't know anything about building and you put a window in the morning, by the afternoon you wanted to take that thing out. So I decided to be fair to myself even before I began, that I would do the very best job I could do every day. At the end of the day, I would accept my progress. The next day I would build on it. The second thing is that if you use non-standard materials like so many sculptors do, you can't always go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy the things you need. And similarly, if you decide to use a big tree as the mainstay of your house and you cut it down, how do you know it would work, and who would you ask? Well, I played a game with myself. I called giving it my one best shot. I said, if I'm the last person on earth and there's nobody else to ask, what do I think? Do I think it's strong enough? And somewhere along there, I began accepting responsibility for the kinds of things that I designed and made. The third thing is that working day in and day out in a very unself-conscious way, I began to see what I liked and what I didn't like. I saw how important personal preference is in making those kinds of decisions. And over a period of time, I began to develop my own sense of personal aesthetic. And finally, I saw how important need was in getting anything done. I really needed this house, so I was able to coalesce my best energies and direct my best problem-solving skills. And sometimes when I have a friend, a sculptor friend, who's not doing that well with their work, I say, hey, you have to figure out how to knead it. Well, I didn't know it was getting out of hand, but my neighbors did. They were always coming down to my house and scratching their head and kicking the dirt. And once my friend Brooks brought a relative from another area of the country, he said, I really like what you're doing here. You're a real artist. Well, maybe for all of you, that would have been a great thing for somebody to say. But for me, I wanted him to take it back, and I felt like it was the end of the earth. Upon reflection, I realized that as a child, I thought being an artist was the greatest thing you could be. The only trouble was it came with this tremendous sense of social responsibility. You were supposed to do something great, something earth-shaking, something that saved people. And it was connected with that onerous word talent. Somehow you were supposed to be talented. Well, I knew what that word art and talent had to do with Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci. I just couldn't figure out what it had to do with me or anything I was doing at my house. Well, one morning, as if by magic, I found myself enrolling in the nearest art department, taking sculpture courses and art history. And for me, that moment, that day was the best day of my life, because I didn't know there was anybody else like me. I didn't know there were lots of people like handling material, like seeing their ideas get worked out in 3 dimensions. The only trouble was I was kind of an art nerd, and I'd walk around to people and I'd say, is this art? Is this art? How come this person gets to paint this board blue and call it art? Well, I was about to hold forth when one of the professors, Mike Sendry, grabs me by the throat, starts choking me to death. He says, who in the hell cares if it's art or not? Why don't you just go in there, make whatever you're going to make? Who's going to know the difference in 20 years anyway? The truth is I needed that permission giving. And I learned some things while I was in school that I think helped on my path towards becoming a working artist. Maybe the biggest thing is an importance of a role model, because I didn't know if you had to have a psychiatrist standing by when you made your first work, whether you had to have great family upheaval, or whether you had to go to New York and work as a waiter in order to qualify. It wasn't until I saw these pretty normal people who were intensely interested in making things that I realized there was going to be some hope for me. The second thing is it's hard to be a food faddist unless there are other people around who eat beans and rice. And similarly, it's hard to be a working artist unless there are other people around who understand what you're going through. And for me, the biggest challenge as a working artist is to maintain a sense of personal equilibrium in a society that gives high marks to culture but really ignores individual makers. And it's easy to have an identity crisis at any time in your career when which you go into your studio and for a minute you can't realize who made the work. And so then you're glad that there's a university art department around, or that you have a friend in a distant location. You call them up and say, "Hey Scott, are you still working?" And they say, "What's the problem?" And somehow you're relieved and released to go work in your studio again. The third thing, I began to realize that there was a big difference between doers and viewers, between people who make things and people who look at things seriously. In other words, museum directors and curators and gallery owners, their job is to decide what object is more inherently interesting one than another, or where something fits in the lifeline of art. You know, that's not my job. I have to be true to my materials and true to my ideas. And a lot of times when I start working, I really don't know what I'm doing. If at that point I had to decide whether something was good or not, or whether it was art historically significant, I would never get started. And finally, I had to deal with that word talent. And I decided, although talent wasn't irrelevant, it just wasn't the issue. I had the right to make what I wanted, whenever I wanted. Basically, I could do as much work as I could afford. Well, at one shimmering moment, I decided to quit school, go home, build a studio, and get to work. Well, you know, it's one thing to know that you have a right to make something. It's another thing to know what you're going to make and how you're going to make it. Luckily for me, I kept up with the university. I went to a lecture by a woman named Marty Zelt, who had been she was a seamstress in her life before sculpture. She brought Velcro fasteners and zippers to her work. And after that lecture, I'm thinking, I wonder what I already know. I wonder what simple technology, some simple method of joining, some simple material that I might already be familiar with. As I'm driving home, you know, I'm seeing all these saplings along the sides of the road in North Carolina where maintenance crews constantly strive to keep them down. And like Saul being struck off his horse on the way to Damascus, I have an epiphysis. I said, maybe I could use those. Well, you know, it wasn't so unusual that a woodsman like myself would see the potential of the saplings along his driveway. They're plentiful, they're renewable, and it's just like having a giant warehouse always at your fingertips. And after working with this material for a while, I realized that I had a deeper resonance with it. I had grown up in the woodlands of North Carolina. We have lots of underbrush and intersecting lines. And as some kids laid in fields, looked at the architectural details of clouds, I'd looked at the drawing quality of the winter landscape, all those branches up in the trees, all those potential lines in which to draw. When I turned to sculpture, it seemed easy to co-opt the forces of nature and play that natural drawing style out onto the surfaces of these large gestural works. Before I could get going, I had to figure out what birds and beavers and other natural shelter builders know about sticks, and that is that they have an inherent method of joining. If you drag a stick through the woods, you always start like this, but before long you're just jerking it, and it's got that infuriating tendency to tangle with everything. And that's the method that Sam and I use to put these things together. And every stick has a little flexibility, so if you flex it, you pull it through a matrix and let it go, it snaps back and holds itself in place. That's the how, but the what. If you had seen me at the time, you would have really had pity on me, because I could spend maybe 5 minutes in a museum before running down the steps with a headache and sweaty palms and saying, you know, I think they've used all the good ideas up. Or, you know, you'd look in an art magazine for a few minutes and have heart palpitations and say they've exploited every material. Or you find out that in the last census Over 1 million people in New York City alone claim to be visual artists. We say, God, there's too many of us. But you know, after worrying about this, I realized that I love to make things, and the art world was just going to have to lump it. Before I show you a couple of images, I'd like to say two other things. One about the art world in general, and the second about creativity. You know, for me, the art world is not a wall. What it is a loosely knit group of jobs, and those jobs are filled with people, good people like you and I. And those people don't tell artists what they have to do. You know, artists have to decide what they want to do. Like, there's not one of us that hasn't imagined being taken in a fiery chariot to a major city where our work and ourselves, we get what we deserve. The only trouble is we all want different things. Some people want a certain kind of car. They want to live in a certain community. They want a certain kind of house. They want a certain kind of life. And you know, it's these real world priorities that we set that determine what opportunities we allow ourselves to be available to. The second thing is that, you know, I arrive with a pair of clippers and 3 weeks later I have to have a good piece. So I've discovered a few things about creativity. One is that hysteria rides on the shoulder of every creative person. And if you want to go somewhere and start immediately, you have to figure out how to direct your hysterical energy. The second thing is that I have different states of being. I have a state of being in which I do my laundry and eat my dinner, and another state, a door behind which all my problem-solving skills lay. The question is, how do you go over and open that door quickly? If you were in North Carolina and I happen to be there on a Friday and my friends come over to the house and we start talking and you see the cares of the week fall away and you think, why aren't we on some kind of national talk show or something? You know, what I think is the best place for making is one in which a person feels unself-conscious but fully themselves. And that's the state I seek. It's not about wringing my hands or feeling desperate. It's really a sensation of being with your friends. You know, one of the important things about my work is that there are no studio doors to close and no place to hide, and the work is conducted in full public view. Now, for some artists, that would be consternating, but for me, I feel like that it's a cultural exchange, one in which those people and the energy of that place is somehow woven back into the sculpture itself. You know, when I'm on site, I like representing making in a positive way. I like interceding for the arts, I like demystifying the process. But mainly, I like reminding people that artists are just normal people who are looking for their rightful place in the world of work. So I'd like to show you a few things about my work and talk about it a little bit. This is the house that I built. I've made a few additions since this picture was taken, but generally if you're an owner-builder, you're building your whole life. Everything you did wrong the first week, you call quaint. And I've dug these stones in my backyard, and I know that they got better as they went up. And I've learned to sequence. I do that with my work too. I'll take the bad sticks and put them on the inside. In this case, I put all the good stones on the inside and all the bad stones on the out. I've used cedar from my woods and a lot of collecting. I've carried forward in that in my work too. I tend to gather my saplings wherever I am and try to work with them. I made some sheds for myself, for other people, and that was the beginning of my stick life, I guess. I wasn't real clear whether anybody would build a monument to me, so I just went ahead and built one to myself. I mean, I really like stonework, and I do a lot of it, and I like big feature stones and little goodies. Well, you know, my neighbors, they're always telling me that when their kids go to college, something's going to happen, something different, and this is called waiting it out in Maple. And of course, I have a lot of neighbors. And I set it out there in the front yard and so that they could see themselves. I just wanted to show you a few things about materials. So when you look at the materials in the sculpture over on campus, you think those lines run forever, but a lot of the lines are not that long. These are maple saplings out by my studio. This is my friend Scott. We're carrying materials in. Often it's an addition-subtraction problem. In this case, we're carrying them into the building, and we stuck them right back out the window. But this is at the Heron School of Art in Indianapolis, and oftentimes I'm looking for saplings where they're taking them down. In this case, they were building a big golf course, and they allowed us to come and get a lot of great saplings. This was in Wyoming. Somebody had the misapprehension that if they took a bulldozer and tried to clean the willow out of their lake, there would be less willow. But in fact, there was only twice as much willow, and we were recipient of all that good growth. This is in Hawaii. We're gathered on the shoulders of a volcano. We gather in strawberry guava and eucalyptus, coffee tree, Java plum, various things. This is in Ireland, and we're gathering at a willow farm that raises biomass. So there's a local power plant that chips this and puts it in a power plant. So we have to be tricky to find our wood. We ask a lot of around. This was in Serbia. We had the river had risen so high we couldn't get to our place of gathering. So we got this guy to bring his horse and buggy, and we went out and got our saplings. This is in Richmond, Virginia, just to say that a lot of times we have together with a lot of leaves, and we have crews that pick the leaves off, which is just a terrible job. Luckily, we did not have to do that here. This was called Diamonds in the Rough. It was a bunch of different little diamond-shaped cabanas, 9 of them, I think. And so we were working on it with those, and this is the final product, from leaf to no leaf. This is a willow farm in Ireland, and I wanted to show you a piece from start to finish. Of course, every time they cut these, what they call the stump, a stool, every time they cut the stool, they get twice as many sticks. And you can use the same stool for 40 years. So, over its lifetime, this stool produces quite a number of sticks. We had the city come and help us get our structural pieces and our material over to the site. I was working at Tala Community Arts Center in Dublin, and I wanted people to be able to see what I was doing, and the Art Center was very concerned that somebody would climb it, so we had to have it inside the fence. I chose a kind of vernacular architecture of these Irish round towers, which the monks built in the 8th to the 10th century. And this is my scaffold truck, and I decided to build around this tree. This was our scaffolding. It's about 50 feet tall. And this is my Tower of Tala. It looks a little bit like an Irish round tower. That was my helper there, my assistant. We built this together. We had some help from a scaffolding company to help put the scaffolding up and take it down. This was 2 years later when the piece was just about to come down. All the living branches were left on the outside of the tree itself. This is a piece from start to finish at Cornell. This is a patch of great maple saplings that we were taking. There again, we have to transport them to our site. This was the site between a dormitory and a performing arts center. You see we marked all the power and all the utilities out on the ground. In the case here at the university, we had a big power cable through there. We had a big water line, a gas line, and I'm happy to say we hit none of those things while we were digging. They decided I could drill into this plaza because they were going to replace it. My idea was to build a companion piece for each one of these trees. And so I often make a little drawing and try to figure out how each one of the elements that we were building would react to the tree. So that's what I was doing here, marking it out on the ground so we knew where to drill. We've got little white dots where we're going to drill our support structures. You might have all, when you were traveling up and down the sidewalk, seen us drilling out there and suffering to get through the ground. This is what we did. We cored through it with a coring machine and then dug even further and put our structural pieces down in there. What we do is to kind of get those pieces in the ground, and then we shape the piece by tying it over to the scaffolding. And then after we finish stabilizing it, we can cut it loose. So that's what we're doing. This was a pretty tall piece, maybe, 30 feet tall. So we had a lot more scaffolding going than we've had out at the site. This was its final day when we were having our opening. Our opening is on Friday at 4, so please come. I wanted to talk about how I work. And this was a piece at the College of Art and Design in Savannah. It was on a big wall. It was the county jail that would then turn over to the college to become a library. And since it was a jail, I decided I'd make a lot of escape hatches or a flying carpet that you could get out of jail or something. The way I work really is that I work structurally first. And in this case, I'm weaving these structural pieces into the jail bars. I'm using this platform lift, and I've got a set of scaffolding on the inside of the building as well. And so I'm making a scrim on the building. So it's really like making a canvas and then drawing on it. So the second phase is a kind of the aesthetics. And you can see that now I've got a scrim. I'm trying to add lines where I think they really look good. And finally, after it's all said and done, I kind of work cosmetically and go back and kind of erase things I don't like or inconsistencies by putting little small sticks over those. I wanted to talk about my work in terms of temporary. My work is temporary. It usually lasts about 2 years in good condition before the pieces are taken down. In this case, it was a pink and white dogwood that I bent over several days, and then I worked over it. And then it bloomed the flowers out over the surface of it. It flies over the roof, and there's another container form on the other side. I knew that I had about 3 months before I talked to an arborist. You won't hurt the tree if you take it down in the first 3 months. So the leaves came on it, and then it was time to take it down. So we attached it to this fellow's car, and we pulled it to the dump right down the street. So that was pretty good. This was a piece at Swarthmore College. Luckily for me, the tree had all the limbs on one side and a strong vertical on the other, so I could use one side to weave into and still have a contrasting strong position there. And I knew that the piece had to come down because the tree was it was old, and they said in 2 years we're cutting the tree down. So I was able to use it. It's a little higher than 50 feet. So, sometimes you just have to put your life at risk almost to get up and do the work, because you don't want to look like you cheated and just put it halfway up because you were too scared to go to the top. This was its winter configuration. And then this stunning takedown. This was at the 2-year mark. They came and cut the thing down. It's actually got a boom that runs up the other side of the tree. It's not really a flying saucer. This was a piece in Denmark. It's in a sculpture park in which you have to use the material that's in the park. It's a nature park. And so this is little big man. He's seeking his reflection when he looks in this pool. And so you can crawl up in his body and look at his face. And then this was about a year later. The area floods every winter and kind of gives it a more of a mythic quality. 2 years, and that old fighter fell down. Of course, that might look better than the original piece. It was so relaxed. This is a piece that was at Frederick Meyer Garden. Every culture has made face jugs, and North Carolina potters make all kinds of face jugs, and this was my attempt at a face jug. It's called Juggernaut, and you look at it, you look out the window and look at it, and it looks back at you. So it turns out that after they had a 5-foot snow that came tearing down the roof, at about the 2-year mark, it left these things on the ground and screaming. Finally, this was an attempt to prolong the life of the piece. And when we built this piece, we put living plants down in the walls so that we would had hopes that years later there would just be a grove of trees. This was built after Bramante's Tempietto in the perfect proportion. It's called Sittin' Pretty. It was in the South Carolina Botanic Garden. And this was about 5 years later, and then this was about 7 years later, and now there's just a big grove of trees there. It's been a bit of time since it was built. I want to talk about my work in terms of drawing, because everything you can do with a pencil, you do with a stick. In other words, when you hit a piece of paper with a pencil, you hit it with one weight and finish off with another. You basically make tapered lines. So if you're able to organize the tapers of your sticks, then you get a sense of implied motion. This is a piece that's at the North Carolina Museum. It's about as permanent as I have in it until they decide to get rid of it. But interior work really lasts a long time. It's about 70 feet long and about 16 feet high. And so it's really lasted well, but you can see that I've taken contrasting colored sticks and helped with the emphasis. A lot of things you do about breaking the edge and letting it have these little fine points as it moves into the atmosphere, all those things you really end up making for a successful surface. Here I am working on the thing. We're using a platform lift as well. My friend Romy helps me a lot. And this was at Sheboygan, Wisconsin, at the Kohler Art Center, and I like this piece because it shows really the drawing quality of the sticks. These sticks have the structural pieces are woven into the structural parts above the light track, so I've got about extra 10 feet above the light tracks, and you can just go up and touch the pieces. They wiggle a bit, but it's rosario, red twig dogwood, and willow, and so if you cut it in the winter and take it inside, it really holds its color. So I love the quality, the drawing quality of this piece. And of course, this is kind of like skywriting. This is in Denmark. I've got these pieces in a poplar grove that you get off the ferry, you come around, and you all of a sudden are faced with this, looking out at the North Sea. There's such an immediacy in this work. We just go across the road, we gather the sticks, put some scaffold up, and start working in the trees. This was at the World Trade Center. I think it's kind of big city calligraphy. If you work for the Port Authority, the first thing they tell you is you can't bring sticks in the building if they're going to touch the walls, the floors, or the ceilings, which I saw Putnam Ladder Company down the street, and I went down there and borrowed some ladders and said, well, I did what you said. It doesn't touch the floors. But one of the things, the advantages of working on site line by line and stick by stick is that you can adjust the scale. And the lobby of the Trade Center was about 10,000 square feet, so you just go get some more ladders and keep working until you feel like you've got an adequate scale there. This was at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. That's actually about 3 floors of sticks. And this is kind of using sticks to enhance the kind of drawn architectural quality of the building. So there's about 16 feet in there. I had a platform lift and I was going up and down. I'm actually taking this picture from on top of the building through the oculus that's at the top of the stairway. And of course, I could hear your confessions. People were walking up and down stairs the whole time, and then I'm inside there, and we have a spotter on the outside, and people are talking to us the whole time. So we're used to working in crowded places where, and being very careful with the carpet and everything else. This was at the old site of the American Craft Museum in New York, and using the stairway and the architectural feature to kind of enhance the whole idea of drawing. I use volunteers in my work. Initially, I just use these volunteers to help me gather, but there's a lot of closet stick gatherers out there, and so they put pressure on me to actually help work. And I started the whole thing because I needed the organizations, I needed their goodwill and their leverage in the community to find things and to get myself organized. When people walk up, often the visitors will say, well, how do your volunteers know what to do? I said, well, we've all been kids. And for kids, they know everything about sticks. They're a weapon, a tool, a piece of the wall. So all we do is kind of reawaken those childhood memories, and people are good to go. I think that kids live out the kind of shadow life of our hunting and gathering past. As they pick up a stick, they just already know what to do with it. So this is you can see I had too many bottles of Bordeaux there. This was in France, and there's a series of restaurants around this sculpture park. They serve wine at lunchtime. People sit out there and watch us work. So we decided that kind of falling wine bottles were the way to go. This was the final product, and a lot of times I use these in couplets so they held themselves up a little bit better. So, leaning things one on another is often a good way to go to help stabilize the whole thing. These are the sponsors that came out the day that I was finished. I wanted to show you this. This was at Middlebury College. I wanted to show you how many people it took to build a sculpture, and if we have a final photo here, you'll see that there's been a lot of people from the college, a lot of people from town, and even some people from a distance that came to help on this sculpture. In Wisconsin, we were building the Garden of Curiosity, and this is how many students that it took to help on this piece. This is a normal day for me at the office. I'm on the University of Michigan campus trying to build something. People come up and talk to you the whole time. What I like is that there's a recurring story. And so about every time that we're working, we'll start and a couple will come up, and while the husband tries to surreptitiously push the sculpture over with his shoulder, the wife will say, "Honey, we could live here." And he'll say, "We can't live here." And what I have come to think about when I hear that is that, we all have this kind of desire to cross the forest curtain and just to go out there and live with the animals for a while without being encumbered by all our worldly possessions. So I hear the story and I really connect with it as well. Sometimes we have impromptu openings. This was a piece in New Harmony, Indiana, and we took the scaffolding down and people jumped out of the barber chair half-shaved. They got out of their car and left them in the middle of the road, and everybody came over to see what we were doing and how it finally turned out. In Ireland, kids come even if it's raining like cats and dogs. In Chicago, we had some interested viewers that were looking. I forgot to say that people send me pictures of themselves in the sculpture. These are legs from Houston. I don't know whose legs they are. You won't believe it, but sometimes sculpture is a program for hairstyles and new hairstyles, like they really do. That's at St. John's. I guess everybody started cutting their hair that way. You might understand this, but do you understand this? I don't. How about this? I don't think it's Photoshopped, to tell you the truth. I would like to talk finally about my work in three ways. One is to use architecture as a foil. This was at the De Cordova in Lincoln, Mass. Built this piece. In my mind, it was a castle falling back to its form of origin as a serf's hut, or maybe a haystack. And so got building it. Nobody wanted me up there on that slate roof, so we built a mock-up and picked it up with a crane and set it like a dunce cap on the top of the building. The only trouble was that you looked up at it, it looked more like a squirrel's nest. So we had to get this bucket truck and go up there and work on that thing, and it's about 70 feet tall. And at first you're a little bit afraid, but then you're so given over to your work that you just tell the operator, "Will you hold my belt for a minute?" And you just get right out on the top of that thing and start working. And you can see that we did make a big difference by enhancing those lines up there. This was a kind of insect attacking a art center in Florida. But anyway, we have to maintain the ongoing activities of a space, so we built this piece down in Hollywood, Florida. And this was in Hollywood, California, and we working at a Max Azria store, we had to give the store a case of the paisley cloth. I also worked with trees and using trees as foils and using their branches. This was in Japan. Tree was planted in front of a little temple that 400 years before, and so I was able to live in that temple and also then build a little sculpture in the front of it using these reeds. And so these are kids that came to visit me, Occidental children, and you can see how I built into the Virgin, kind of in a bamboo forest. This was in England in a Lalandia hedge. When you look at these hedges, they look so solid, but if you walk inside, there are these huge cathedral-like spaces that are caught in between them. So I was skylighting those and building a kind of series of rooms that went down through the hedge itself. I don't have any real good pictures at the inside. But also, this was in Birmingham, Alabama, building this piece, and goes up through the trees. The top piece is about 50 feet tall. And, what I thought of it as a roller coaster for squirrels. I joined the sticks together from limbs from different trees and wove over them. It was kind of a scaffolding nightmare. But, when you got up on the third floor, you could look out and really see that the thing had some real sense of presence. A piece in, not only have I used trees, but I've used the overtones of trees. This is a piece in Savannah, and building an architectural folly in underneath these kind of big live oak trees. Live oak trees dropped all this kind of moss down in it and made it very beautiful. Also in Hawaii, using this monkey pod tree as a foil, and having these kind of bookend pieces that go up into the limbs of the tree and then back down again. A piece that you saw before from New Harmony, Indiana, I was able to use the hollow underneath this hornbeam hedge to build this kind of cliff dwelling. Had a lot of fenestration because the main street of the town went down the other block, and you could see my windows versus their windows. And the winter configuration where you had a lot of verticality and made a kind of another piece contrast. A piece in North Carolina at the North Carolina Museum using these cherry trees and taking a whole tree to support one of these big heads. They're about 35 feet tall and they look in different directions. Of course, I had this problem because there was houses all around the outside of the park, and the kids would come there and play. And then so at a point they told me I had to go take it down. So I was out there taking it down, had a bunch of mothers come. And they said, "We're going to tell the artist on you." And I said, "I'm so sorry, I am the artist. They're making me take this down." And this is a piece, kind of the earth-saving turtle. This was in a big castle in France, and so the turtle's carrying the earth on its back. It's kind of layers of entry. When you go in, there's hallways and more hallways to get to the center of it. This is the actual home that belongs to the French government, and I built that in their garden. A piece in the Morris Arboretum in Philadelphia, and this started out as a snail shell, ended in my garden. It ended up as a layer cake. Then I thought, well, no, it's a Japanese hairstyle from the 14th century, and then finally it became Dr. Zhivago's in the Summer Palace. But so not only have I worked in trees and worked with the overtones of trees, sometimes people just say, "This is all we've got. You've got to work in this spot." So as I've worked here, I've learned to use these structural supports that we put in the ground and then pull the shape we want. This shape had all these billows on it. So, we've done different kinds of things, different conventions to try to figure it out. I took that piece down and then put this piece in its place. It's called A Waltz in the Woods. It had these kind of little dancing buildings that went with it. And this was a piece from North Carolina, a private commission for these dogs as a doghouse. But what I like about this piece is that, there are no wires or screws or string involved. And you can see how complicated of a structure. We built these girders out of twisting these sticks together and built quite a large construction. Sometimes I have to work inside and there's no trees or architecture to support it. This was in Brussels. This is called Sleepwalking. These pieces are about 27 feet tall, and they're built with a kind of a concept of a tripod underneath them. So some of the big sticks point down, some of them point up, and so I was able to pull this off. This was at Purdue. It shows all the kinds of willow we were able to gather out along the river. There in that Ohio Valley, there are a lot of serpent mounds, and so we took those kind of serpentine ideas and played it out. We're looking at it from the top of a roof, and but it was a very fantastic set of walkways. A piece at Bowdoin College. I've learned not only to build big single structures, but build lots of elements and stick those elements together for structural support. A piece in South Carolina out in front of a performing arts center. This piece is called Ain't Misbehavin', and there are 5 heads, and they look down the nexus of 5 roads that end at that very point. So you got a face looking down each avenue. A piece at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington, and being able to use the reflection to help extend the piece rather than cry about the fact that you couldn't control so much space. Use the reflection to help you do that. And a piece that lately came down at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. Of course, the witches took this over instantly, but it is the home of the House of the Seven Gables, so I was prone to make gables. And this was its winter configuration this last winter before it came down. What I really wanted to show you is how many people would come to see a sculpture burned. This happens to be everybody in Scotland. And this was the piece, the faded piece. It was made after the Callanish standing stones. And it had a beautiful setting. This was a scale picture. This is my scaffoler. He brought me the scaffolding. That day he came to pick it up. And then this was that fateful night where they'd planned 1 year ahead to have a big dance, a Druidic kind of thing. And then this is the next morning. And can you believe that the dancers would cook their breakfast on my sculpture? I cannot. And I do have a book, in case and I'm sure you'll be able to find it easily. Thank you very much. Thank you, Craig. Okay.
Testing.
Patrick, this has been extraordinary in every way.
Thank you for having me.
And I've had the wonderful opportunity of being around this incredible man, and he makes you feel like you've known him your entire life. It's been a joy. We now have an opportunity to ask him questions and answers. There will be people in the aisles with handheld microphones. So let's take a few minutes and just pop up, and one of our ambassadors will find you and bring you a microphone.
You better bring the lights up.
And bring the lights up in the house as high as you can. Wonderful. Anyone, don't be shy.
Oh, we can go.
There she is, grab her.
Somebody must have a good question.
Yeah, right there.
Does it ever make you sad that your pieces can't last for very long?
Now, the question is whether it pains me to see these pieces come down. Well, the piece I love the most is the piece I'm working on, because I like making things. I'm sure that people who write books don't go back and read their books. They go write another book. And so from my artist point of view, I'm satisfied about building. From the maker's point of view, one of the things that I find is that in any given site, a sculpture by the 2-year mark is lost. Sculptures contain ideas, and people accommodate themselves to those ideas. And after a while, you know, it doesn't have the same impact. You can move it to a new site, and it might reinvigorate it. But I think that it redirects people to the most essential part of sculpture, and that is it's something that excites your imagination, something that's transportive, something that moves you. It's not about what something is worth or really how long it lasts. It's really about what it means to you and finding points in your own life that you could connect with the sculpture. Luckily, people love sticks, and they have some experience with those and some overtones that it carries from the forest, so that you might have had your first kiss under the lilac bush, and you go into these structures and you think, God, I remember that. I remember playing with sticks. I remember doing this, or I remember doing that. So I get my greatest pleasure out of building, and I think that having a 2-year mark is pretty good for a sculpture.
Another question, right down here.
Does your son plan to continue this legacy?
Say it one more time.
Does your son plan to continue this legacy of art?
Some things are unknown. You know, sometimes you just cease and desist. You know, I'm still vigorous, so I can continue working, but at a point, like your sculptures, they just start being more disheveled, and then all of a sudden you have to stop.
Right here.
Some people might not know that what you're making here is going to have a companion piece down at the other Blue College in Provo. And I was wondering if you could talk about how the one that you're making here is going to relate to that one back and forth, and what other companion structures have you made throughout your career, and what that means to connect one piece in one land to another.
One thing, we have a great show at the library. If you go down to the basement of the library, that shows the breadth of work that you can make from sticks. Not only do we show these works, but you can see others. There's always some relationship, because sticks have, people have an affinity for them. And, but you know, I come to a site and I try to think of the right scale of the piece. I try to think where it should go. I think how it relates in size to its surroundings, to try to think about how I can intrigue people to walk into it. In a college situation where everybody is really busy, if you put something out in the middle of a field, nobody's going to go out there. So, positioning it right by the library, there's some trees behind it, there's a nice scale there. When I work down in Salt Lake City at Provo, I've got an interior space, so that's an entirely different kind of space. So, you know, there's a playoff here of, you think this work is in a natural setting. When you put something inside, it's kind of vaguely unnatural, but you feel like that nature is taking the building back. So, you know, in each place I try to come up with something that I think will be provocative and encouraging, and that will invite people in. And it's a different challenge when you have an interior space versus an exterior space.
If I may, when he arrived on the first day, we were asking, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I've got a few ideas. And he and his son Sam sat down on the concrete walls that are there in front of the library, and he pulled out this crumpled up piece of paper and opened it up, and there were these series of circles. And he says, I think this will be the blueprint for it. And go see what these circles look like. It's really amazing to me. Also, we took our advancement council there today, and what I love more than anything, there's something about his work that brings the child out in all of us. No matter what age you are, you walk in there and you're suddenly 5, 6, 7 years old in your treehouse, and going back to a real age of innocence. It's amazing, and I hope every single one of you will go into this incredible world that he's created here. More questions, right back here.
So we've seen all these wonderful and beautiful structures, and my question is, do you have failures once in a while, or pieces that you say it's not working, and then what do you do?
The question is about, do we have a level of failure with our sculptures? You know, I never say that. No, you know, when I was a student, I was mentioning to somebody today, they said, you have to do some bad work before you can do good work. I said, I never make bad work. I do the best I possibly can do on it, you know, and then I call that successful. You know, if you're putting your full soul into something. One of the great things about being able to travel and work is that we can devote 3 weeks of full-time, full mental energy to a structure or to working on a sculpture. One of the downsides of being at home and having a studio at home or working in your own hometown is a lot of times you waste a tremendous amount of time and turnaround because you've got all these other things to do in your life, and then you try to squeeze your artwork into that. Whereas the advantages of being somewhere on an island with your sculpture and the people that want it, you know, you really can do an enormously better job there.
More questions? Here's one right in the middle.
Hi, my name is Scotty Fletcher, just so you know. And I was wondering, have you ever thought about doing a piece of live material fully and growing a full piece that would last a longer time?
Well, the question is about, you know, making living structures, and there's a huge tradition in England right now of using live willow for making structures. You'll see if you look at it online that they're kind of limited because everything's got to start in the ground, and it's got to come up and go like this. Basically, some kind of dome shape or kind of tunnel shape, and I guess you could enhance that with dead sticks as well. But, you know, I don't think that it provides the same kind of drawing quality and doesn't allow you to have the luxury of surface that I'm characterized as my own work.
Right back here.
See, as an earthwork sculptor, who are some of the artists that you would look up to?
Well, you know, one of the things that's the question is about who might be your role models, you know. I was saying the other day that my drawings are so pitiful. But I went to one of the museums in Washington, D.C., and Hirshhorn, and I saw David Smith's drawing books laid out. I said, I'm saved. So I'm not sure that you have to, you know, completely render to get your ideas out there. Making a beautiful picture and getting your ideas going are really different things. Sometimes my wife will look at something I draw and she'll say, did you spill coffee on your paper? I said, no, that's my drawing. So, you know, sometimes we'll have to make a model for people. And my joke is that I would have brought my model today, but my toothpaste wouldn't dry. Because oftentimes we're like, how are we going to, with crumpling paper, taping it together, trying to make something that we can make our shape comprehensible to the people that are going to help us.
One final question, right there at the back. Stand up, and then we can see. Yeah, that's you, right there.
Thank you. So first I wanted to thank you. I have really fond memories of trigonometry at Carleton as an undergrad.
Oh yeah.
It was very central. I wondered if there are ecological considerations in the materials that you harvest, and in particular, do you ever use invasive species in your work?
Well, you know, I think of myself as a kind of an environmentalist in my personal life. What you do in your work life is say yes when somebody says, are you an environmentalist? You say, oh yeah, because you want to get some more work. Or, you know, the worst one was that I was out in California and said, you know, like I've answered to a lot of monikers, but somebody said, I really like your work, it's so farm to table. And so I said, maybe my work can live even beyond that.
Well, we want to thank Patrick, and we have a small gift, and if my assistant will join me. here.
Oh, how
What
beautiful.
we have is a photograph of Logan Canyon, taken by our own Professor Emeritus Craig Law, of willows. These are natural colors, Patrick. In the winter, these willows, their skin is red.
That's so beautiful.
And I just want to say on behalf of the Caine College of the Arts, we're so grateful that you've been here. We hope this photograph will be a memory of your time in Logan.
Very much.
We'll mail it to you.
That would be great.
So you don't need to pack it in your suitcase. I have to say, I have seen the power of art in action the last 3 weeks like I've never seen before. It's captivated our community. It's created community. He stopped and taken time to speak to anyone who would pass by. He said, you can tell the climate of a university instantly by the students. He said, you are an exceptional university. Your students are so friendly and they want to engage and speak. They've been to some places where some people won't even look at them, which I find hard to believe.
Really true.
I'm not making this up,
No,
am
you're
I?
not.
And so, as also the workers have come to unload, to build, and to finish, we thank you for the gift you've brought to this community and this incredible piece of art that will engage our community for the next 2 years. Old and young alike will partake of it, and it is the perfect ending to our celebration of the arts at Utah State University. Please join me in thanking Patrick.
Thank you. Sir? Thank you.